Everything seemed perfect in that woman's life until the silent control began to suffocate her. A single night revealed secrets hidden on a forgotten computer. Each click brought her closer to the truth and to the pain. But when the door opened, fear took shape, and the battle for freedom began. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Now, let's continue. On a cold New York winter night, as the biting wind whipped down the avenues of the Upper East Side, Chloe Miller sat on the beige velvet sofa in her apartment, gazing out the 12th floor window. The city lights twinkled like fallen stars, and she gently caressed her 4-month belly, feeling for the first time the delicate movements of the life growing inside her. At 28, with an architecture degree from Columbia University, married for 3 years to Edward Price, a renowned tax attorney, she should have been living a dream. But that night, as she waited for her husband to return from yet another business meeting, Chloe felt a tightness in her chest she couldn't explain. The apartment was impeccable, decorated with Italian, designer furniture, contemporary art on the walls, and a prime view of Central Park. It was the kind of residence featured in architecture magazines. Edward insisted that everything always be perfect, from the temperature of the air conditioning to the arrangement of the throw pillows on the sofa. Early in their marriage, Chloe thought he just had high standards, a common trait among successful people. Over time, however, that quest for perfection began to feel suffocating. She couldn't move a painting without him questioning it. She couldn't invite friends over for dinner without his prior approval. And when she got pregnant, everything got worse. Edward began to control every aspect of her routine, which doctors she should see, what kind of diet she should follow, even who she could and couldn't talk to. He said it was for the baby's good, that he just wanted to ensure everything went perfectly. But Chloe felt like she was losing herself, piece by piece, day by day. Calls to her family had become rare. Visits to her brothers, who lived in a modest apartment in Queens, were practically non-existent. Edward always had a convincing excuse, always wrapped in apparent concern and care. That night, as she looked out the window, Chloe made a decision. She needed to understand what was happening. She needed answers. Edward had left in a hurry for an urgent meeting, leaving his laptop open on his desk in the home office. He never did that. He always locked everything away, always protected his passwords as if they were state secrets. But that night, perhaps out of haste or carelessness, the computer was there, the screen still lit, displaying an open Excel spreadsheet. With her heart pounding, Chloe approached. She didn't want to snoop, she wasn't that kind of person. But something inside her, a maternal intuition perhaps, told her she had to look, she had to know. The spreadsheet showed strange financial transactions, monthly transfers to names she didn't recognize, regular payments to medical clinics that weren't the ones she went to, large sums being sent to accounts in offshore tax havens, and there, in a separate tab, something that made her blood run cold. A file with women's names, dates, amounts, and coded notes. She started clicking on other documents, encrypted emails, contracts she had never seen, references to medical procedures she knew nothing about. One file in particular caught her eye. It was a report from a fertility clinic in Westchester, dated 6 months before she got pregnant. The report talked about genetic selection, desirable traits, specialized procedures. Chloe felt her legs tremble. She and Edward had tried to conceive naturally for months. He always said they should let it happen in its own time. But these documents suggested something completely different, something he had done without her knowledge. The sound of the key in the lock made her jump. Edward was back. With trembling hands, she quickly closed the laptop and rushed back to the living room, trying to look natural. But when he walked in, bringing the scent of expensive whiskey and imported cologne with him, his eyes found hers immediately. There was something different in them, something she had never noticed before. Or maybe it had always been there, and she just hadn't wanted to see it. "Edward," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We need to talk." He took off his suit jacket slowly, his eyes fixed on her. "About what, darling?" "About us. About this marriage." about everything you're hiding from me." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Edward moved closer, and for the first time Chloe felt genuine fear of the man she had married. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. His voice was low, controlled, as cold as the night outside. "You were going through my things." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, and the way he said it, with that terrifying calm, made Chloe realize she had crossed an invisible line, a line she didn't even know existed. "I saw the documents, Edward. The transfers, the names, the fertility clinic, what you did." He took a deep breath, and for a moment, Chloe thought he would explain, that there was a logical reason for everything, that she was misinterpreting it. But what he said next destroyed any hope she had. "I did what was necessary to ensure our child would be perfect, to ensure you wouldn't ruin it with your imperfections." The words hit her like a bucket of ice water. Imperfections. He spoke of her as if she were a flawed project, as if she were just a means to an end. The argument that followed was intense. Chloe demanded answers. Edward refused to give them. He said she was being hysterical, that the pregnancy was messing with her emotions, that she needed to rest, but Chloe wouldn't back down. Not this time. That's when he changed his strategy. His voice became dangerously soft. He moved toward her, and Chloe took a step back, but he kept advancing until she was cornered against the kitchen wall. He didn't touch her, but he didn't need to. The threat was there, unspoken, but present in every calculated movement. "You're going to forget what you saw, Chloe. You're going to continue being the perfect wife, the perfect mother to be. And if you even think about doing anything stupid, you will regret it. You know I have friends in high places, judges, police captains, people who owe me favors. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, a respected attorney, or you, a pregnant, emotionally unstable woman?" Chloe felt the world spin. Her legs gave out and she leaned against the marble countertop. The stress, the fear, the revelation, it all crashed down on her at once. The last thing she saw before everything went dark was Edward's indifferent face, watching her as if she were an experiment that had gone wrong. When she woke up, she was on the cold kitchen floor. She didn't know how much time had passed. It could have been minutes or hours. The house was silent. Edward was gone. She tried to get up, but a sharp pain in her abdomen made her stop. The baby. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone and dialed the only number she could trust. "Luke," she whispered when her brother answered. "I need help." Across the city, in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, Luke Miller immediately dropped the video game controller he was using to play with his younger brother, Tyler. At 32, an electrician by trade and a security systems technician by vocation, Luke had always been protective of his younger sister. Something in her voice made him stand up instantly. "Chloe, what happened?" Tyler, 25, a law student and an intern at a legal aid clinic, also got up, seeing the concern on his brother's face. Luke put the phone on speaker. "I'm alone. Edward left. I found things, Luke. Terrible things. And when I confronted him, I passed out. I'm scared." Her voice was broken, fragile. Luke and Tyler exchanged a look. They had never fully trusted Edward. There was something about him, a coldness beneath the polished facade that had always bothered them. But Chloe had seemed happy, or at least that's what she said, and they had respected her choice, even when the visits became less frequent, even when she started to pull away. "Stay put, Chloe, we're coming to get you now," Luke said, already grabbing his car keys. But as they ran for the elevator, Luke's phone buzzed. It was a notification from an app he rarely checked, an app he had secretly installed in Chloe's apartment years ago when she moved in with Edward. It was a basic audio security system he'd installed, telling her it was to protect her from break-ins. But the truth was, he never fully trusted that marriage. And now, the recording from the last hour showed him exactly why. He stopped in the hallway, pressed play, and what he heard made his blood boil. The argument, the veiled threats, the sound of Chloe falling, and the silence that followed. Tyler heard it too, and his expression hardened. "That guy is going to pay for this," Tyler muttered, clenching his fists. Luke put a hand on his brother's shoulder. First, we make sure Chloe's safe. Then we deal with the rest. Let's go. They ran down the stairs, got into Luke's white Honda Civic, and sped off on the BQE towards Manhattan. The New York traffic, always chaotic, seemed to be conspiring against them. Every red light was an eternity. Every honk a form of torture. Luke drove with a clenched jaw while Tyler stayed on the phone with Chloe, making sure she was okay, that the baby was moving, that she was still conscious. When they finally arrived at the luxury building where Chloe lived, the doorman, a man in his 60s who had always been friendly, hesitated to let them up. "Mr. Price left instructions not to allow any visitors tonight," he said, looking uncomfortable. Luke leaned over the desk. "John, my sister is upstairs alone, pregnant and not feeling well. If you don't let us up, I'm going to have to call the fire department and make a scene. And I don't think you or Mr. Price want that kind of attention, do you?" The doorman swallowed hard, looked both ways, and finally nodded. "Apartment 1203, but please don't cause any trouble for me." In the mirrored elevator, Luke and Tyler saw their own reflections. Two ordinary guys in simple clothes with messy hair, the exhaustion of hard-working men etched on their faces. So different from the world Chloe had chosen to live in, but none of that mattered now. She was family, and you protect family. Are you enjoying this story? Tell me what you think of it, and how you think it will end. The door opened before Luke could even ring the bell. Chloe was there, pale, tears streaming down her face, one hand on the wall for support and the other holding her. "Belly." Luke wrapped her in a protective hug and she collapsed, sobbing against her brother's chest. Tyler quickly stepped inside, closing the door behind him and scanning the apartment with watchful eyes, as if expecting Edward to appear at any moment. "Are you hurt?" Luke asked, gently pulling back to examine her face. Chloe shook her head, but the pain in her eyes said more than words ever could. It wasn't a physical pain, at least not entirely. It was something deeper, more devastating. The pain of discovering that the life she had built was a carefully constructed lie. "He didn't hit me," she whispered, as if she needed to make that clear. "But the way he talked to me, Luke, the things he said, it was like I wasn't a person to him, like I was just a piece in some game where only he knows the rules." Tyler, who had gone to the kitchen to get his sister a glass of water, returned with a serious expression. "Chloe, you need to go to the hospital. You need to make sure you and the baby are okay." Chloe hesitated. Edward had specific doctors she was supposed to see. Designated clinics. He always said it was because they were the best, because he wanted the best for her and their child. But now, after what she'd discovered, everything seemed to have a sinister meaning. Were those clinics part of his scheme? Did the doctors know what he had done? "I can't go to his doctors," she said, her voice trembling. "Tyler, you work near Bellevue, right? Can we go there?" Tyler nodded. "It's a public hospital. It'll be busy, but they're good. I'll call a friend of mine who's a resident there. She can help us out." While Tyler made the call, Luke helped Chloe gather a few essential items. Her ID, some clothes, her prenatal records. He noticed she was shaking, not just from fear, but from a deep exhaustion, as if she had been carrying an invisible weight for so long that her muscles were finally giving out. In the car, as they crossed the city towards the east side, Chloe started to tell them everything. She talked about the documents she'd found, the clinics, the women's names on the spreadsheets, the genetic selection report. Luke and Tyler listened in silence, Luke's hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Do you think he did something to you without you knowing?" Tyler asked carefully. "With the pregnancy, I mean." Chloe wiped away her tears. "I don't know. I really don't know. We tried for months and nothing happened. Then suddenly I was pregnant. He was so happy, so controlling, like this pregnancy was his personal project." Luke took a deep breath. "Chloe, whatever he did, we're going to find out. And you're not going back to that apartment. Not while he's there. You're staying with us." Chloe wanted to protest, to say she couldn't impose, that they had their own lives. But the truth was she had nowhere else to go. Her friends had drifted away during her marriage. Edward always found reasons for her not to cultivate friendships, and her parents, who lived upstate near Albany, were elderly and couldn't handle this kind of situation. Luke and Tyler were all she had. In the Bellevue emergency room, the scene was as intense as ever. People waited to be seen, doctors rushed back and forth. The distinct hospital smell hung in the air. Tyler's friend, a resident named Dr. Chen, met them at the reception desk. She was a woman in her early 30s, with black hair tied back in a ponytail and a tired but kind expression. "Tyler told me a little about the situation," she said to Chloe, leading her to an exam room. "We're going to do a full workup. Check to make sure everything's okay with you and the baby, all right?" Chloe nodded, and Luke and Tyler remained in the waiting room. Time seemed to drag on. Every minute felt like an hour. Luke checked his phone constantly, half expecting Edward to call, half hoping he wouldn't. Tyler paced back and forth, hands in his pockets, his mind obviously formulating plans. "You recorded everything, right?" Tyler asked suddenly. "The system you installed there," Luke confirmed. "I've got it all. The argument, the threats, everything. But I don't know if it's enough. He's a lawyer, Tyler. He knows the loopholes better than anyone." Tyler stopped pacing and looked intently at his brother. "Then we need more. We need to find out exactly what he's been doing. If he really manipulated Chloe's pregnancy without her consent, that's a crime. And if there are other women involved, like those names on the spreadsheet suggest, this is much bigger than we can imagine." 2 hours later, Dr. Chen came out of the exam room with Chloe. The baby was fine, the heartbeat was normal, but Chloe was dehydrated and had high blood pressure. Dr. Chen recommended rest and proper medical follow-up, but it was what she said next that changed everything. "Chloe, during the exam I noticed a few things that concerned me," Dr. Chen said carefully. "You have some old marks on your body, faded bruises, small lesions that look like they could be the result of repeated physical stress. Do you injure yourself often?" Chloe blinked, confused. "No, wait, what kind of marks?" Dr. Chen showed her photos she had taken during the exam with Chloe's permission. Small blemishes on her skin, marks that could be interpreted as falls, but they had a pattern that suggested something more systematic. "I don't remember getting hurt like this," Chloe said, looking at the images with growing horror. "I swear I don't remember." Dr. Chen exchanged a look with Luke and Tyler. "Chloe, this might seem like a strange question, but have you been having episodes of forgetfulness, memory lapses, excessive drowsiness?" Chloe thought about it. There were days she woke up exhausted, even after a full night's sleep. Days she couldn't remember going to bed. She had always attributed it to stress, to the pregnancy, to hormones. But now, with everything she was discovering, a terrible possibility began to form in her mind. "Do you think he was drugging me?" The words came out as a bare whisper. Dr. Chen neither confirmed nor denied it. "I think we need to run some toxicology tests. And I also think you should consider filing a formal report. What you've described about your husband's behavior, combined with these physical findings, is very concerning." Luke stood up, fury contained in every movement. "That son of a bitch, that bastard!" Tyler grabbed his brother's arm. "Calm down. We have to be smart. If we act on impulse, he'll use it against us. We're going to do this by the book, with evidence, with documentation." Chloe was in shock. Everything she had believed in, everything she had thought about her life for the past 3 years, was crumbling. She had tried to be a good wife, tried to do everything right. And all along Edward had been doing things to her, for her, without her knowledge or consent. It was a violation so profound she could barely process it. The toxicology samples were collected. Dr. Chen said the results would take a few days, but she would rush them given the gravity of the situation. In the meantime, Chloe was discharged with strict recommendations for rest and follow-up care. Luke and Tyler took her to their apartment in Queens. It was small, modest, so different from the luxury she had grown accustomed to. But when she walked in and saw the worn-out sofa, the old TV, the family photos, on the walls, she felt more at home than she had in years. "You take my room, I'll sleep on the couch," Luke said, accepting no arguments. Chloe was too exhausted to argue. She lay down on the simple bed, covered with a blanket that smelled of inexpensive fabric softener. And for the first time in months she slept soundly, without fear, without needing to be on alert, because she knew her brothers were there, protecting her, In the living room, Luke and Tyler made plans. Tyler used his contacts from the legal aid clinic, where he interned, to get the name of a lawyer specializing in manipulation and abuse cases. Luke began organizing all the evidence he had: the recordings, the photos of the marks on Chloe's body, the documents she had managed to photograph quickly before Edward returned. "We need to find out what else he's hiding," Tyler said. "Those clinics, those names on the spreadsheets, this is bigger than Chloe. There could be other victims." Luke agreed. "But how do we do that? We can't just hack into his life. He has resources, he has lawyers, he has connections." That's when Luke's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was male, deep, with an accent he couldn't quite place. "Luke Miller," the voice asked. "Who's asking?" "Someone who can help your sister. Someone who knows exactly what Edward Price has been doing, and someone who has proof you could never get on your own." Luke motioned for Tyler to come closer. "Who are you?" "For now, that doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm going to send you some files, documents, records, evidence. Use them well, and protect Chloe. Edward already knows she's gone. And he's not going to let this go." The call ended. Seconds later, Luke's phone buzzed with a series of files being received through an encrypted app. He opened the first file, and his eyes widened. They were detailed bank records showing million-dollar transfers to fertility clinics in several states, contracts signed with women's names, medical reports of unauthorized procedures. Tyler, looking over his brother's shoulder, turned pale. "This is so much worse than we thought. He didn't just do this to Chloe. He's running an entire operation." Luke kept scrolling through the files, and then he saw something that made his heart stop. An old photo from maybe 10 years ago. In it, Edward was at a clinic alongside other men in suits, and in the corner of the photo, partially hidden, was a face Luke never expected to see, a face he thought he would never see again. "It can't be," he whispered. Tyler looked. "What?" Luke zoomed in on the image, but there was no doubt. There, in that old photo, wearing an army uniform, was Ryan, their oldest brother. The brother who had left for a classified military mission 7 years ago and never came back. The brother they had mourned, whose empty casket they had buried, whom they had learned to live without. Ryan was alive, and somehow he was connected to all of this. The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions and revelations. Chloe stayed at her brother's apartment, recovering physically and emotionally, while Luke and Tyler worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle Edward had created. The files sent by the mysterious informant were a goldmine of incriminating information. But the photo of Ryan haunted Luke. How was it possible? Why had he never made contact? And more importantly, what did he know about Edward? Tyler, ever the pragmatist, suggested they focus on Chloe's case first before diving into the mystery of Ryan. The lawyer he had contacted, Patricia Evans Esquiaran, a woman in her 40s with a reputation for being relentless in abuse cases, agreed to meet with them. She worked out of a small office in downtown Brooklyn, far from the gleaming skyscrapers where Edward operated, but her competence was recognized by everyone fighting for justice. When Chloe, still fragile but determined, told her story to Ms. Evans, the lawyer listened intently, taking meticulous notes. At the end, she took a deep breath and looked directly into Chloe's eyes. "What you've been through doesn't have a specific name in our legal code, but we can frame it as a series of crimes: psychological imprisonment, coercion, possible administration of substances without consent. If we can prove there was manipulation of your pregnancy without authorization, that could constitute aggravated assault. But Chloe, I have to be honest with you. Edward Price has resources and connections. This won't be easy." Chloe lifted her chin, and Luke saw in her, for the first time in years, a flash of the brave sister he once knew. "I don't care if it's easy or hard. He can't do this and get away with it. And if there are other women like the documents suggest, they deserve justice too." Ms. Evans smiled. "Then let's get to work. First step is to get an order of protection. Second is to file a formal report with all the evidence you have. Third is to prepare for war, because Edward will fight back. Men like him don't accept losing control. Meanwhile, The results of Chloe's toxicology tests came back. Dr. Chen called to deliver the news personally. There were traces of benzodiazepines in Chloe's blood, a type of sedative that, in controlled doses, could cause drowsiness and memory lapses. Chloe had never taken that kind of medication on her own. The only explanation was that Edward had, in fact, been medicating her without her knowledge. The discovery was devastating but also liberating. Now there was concrete proof. It wasn't just her assumptions or the paranoia of a pregnant woman. It was real, documented, undeniable. It was during this time that a new person entered Chloe's life. Dr. Henry Wallace was an obstetrician at Bellevue, whom Dr. Chen had recommended to oversee Chloe's pregnancy. He was in his mid-30s with brown hair that was always a little messy, discreet glasses, and a kind smile that reached his eyes. Unlike Edward, who was all calculated and polished, Henry had a spontaneity that put Chloe at ease. At their first appointment, he didn't just examine Chloe, he talked to her. He asked about her fears, her expectations, her dreams for the baby. And when she inevitably started to cry while talking about everything she was going through, he didn't rush her or judge her. He just offered her a tissue and waited patiently for her, to compose herself. "You're much stronger than you think," he said with sincerity. "Being here, having the courage to seek help, to face the truth. That's no small thing, Chloe." She looked at him, surprised. Edward had never praised her like that. He had never acknowledged her strength. To him, she had always been weak, imperfect, something to be controlled and molded. In the following weeks, Chloe had regular appointments with Dr. Wallace, and without either of them planning it, a subtle connection began to form between them. It wasn't romance, not yet. Chloe was too vulnerable, too hurt. But it was something gentle, something that warmed her heart in a way she had forgotten was possible. Henry treated her as an equal, respected her opinions, and celebrated every small victory of the pregnancy with her. Luke noticed the change in his sister. She was smiling more, talking about the baby with genuine excitement instead of anxiety. And when he saw the way she looked at Dr. Wallace during one of the appointments he accompanied her to, Luke knew that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for a better future for her. But Edward wasn't staying quiet. The restraining order had been granted, prohibiting him from approaching Chloe. But he found ways to continue exerting control. Calls from unknown numbers to her cell phone, expensive gifts delivered to the brothers' apartment, messages sent through mutual acquaintances, always with the same theme. He wanted to talk, he wanted to explain, he missed her. Chloe ignored it all. With the support of Miss Evans, she had blocked all means of contact. But Edward's presence was like a constant shadow, an unspoken threat that loomed over everything. It was on a rainy July night that everything changed again. Luke was alone in the apartment. Tyler had gone to the library to study, and Chloe was at an appointment with Dr. Wallace. The phone rang, the same unknown number from weeks ago. "Hello," Luke answered cautiously. "We need to meet." The same deep voice as before. "It's about your brother. It's about Ryan." Luke's heart hammered in his chest. "Who are you? Why do you have information about Ryan?" "Because I am Ryan, Luke." The silence that followed was deafening. Luke felt his legs give out and he sat down heavily on the sofa. "That's impossible. Ryan's dead. We got the official notification from Charlie Army 7 years ago." The notification was wrong, or rather it was created intentionally to give me cover for a long-term mission. "Luke, I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to trust me. I've been tracking Edward Price for years. He's involved in something much bigger and much more dangerous than you can imagine." Luke was shaking. If it really was Ryan, why had he never contacted them before? Why let them suffer, thinking he was dead? As if reading his thoughts, the voice continued. "I couldn't make contact. The rules of the operation were clear. Any contact would have put you all in danger, but when I found out Chloe had married one of the targets of the investigation, I couldn't stand by any longer." Luke took a deep breath. "How do I know it's really you? Prove it." The voice chuckled, a familiar sound that brought tears to Luke's eyes. "You were 8 when you broke your arm trying to jump off Grandma's roof because you wanted to be a superhero. I carried you to the hospital over a mile because we didn't have money for a cab. You cried the whole way, not from the pain, but because you were embarrassed you did something so stupid. And I told you that all heroes fall sometimes. The important thing is to get back up. Is that proof enough?" Luke was openly crying now. It was Ryan. It was really him. "Where are you? Why don't you come here?" "It's not safe yet. Edward has eyes everywhere. If he finds out I'm alive and helping you, he'll accelerate his plans. But soon, very soon, I'll be able to reveal myself. For now, keep gathering evidence and tell Chloe she's not alone, that she has more family than she knows." The call ended, but Luke held the phone for long minutes, processing everything. Ryan was alive. For all those years they had mourned him, he was alive. And now, he was helping to protect Chloe. It was almost too much to believe. When Chloe and Tyler returned, Luke told them everything. Their reactions were mixed. Tyler, a natural skeptic, wanted more proof. Chloe, emotionally drained, didn't know if she could handle another twist. But they all agreed on one thing. If Ryan was really alive and had information on Edward, they had to trust him. The files Ryan sent became increasingly detailed. They revealed a complex scheme where Edward and other elite New York men used fertility clinics for unauthorized procedures. Genetic manipulation, trait selection, even surrogate pregnancies, without the full knowledge of the women involved. It was a scandal that, if exposed, would destroy reputations and send dozens of people to prison. Ms. Evans, upon receiving this information, was shocked. "This is much bigger than a domestic abuse case. This is an organized criminal enterprise. We need to involve federal authorities." But there was a problem. Edward had friends in high places, judges, diocese police officials. If they made the wrong move, the evidence could disappear, and everyone involved would walk away free. That's when Ryan made contact again, this time with a plan. He had managed to get someone inside the main clinic Edward used. This person would copy all the medical records, all the contracts, everything needed to build an irrefutable case. But to do that, they needed a distraction. And the distraction would be Chloe. She would have to meet Edward in person, wearing a wire, and get him to confess what he had done. It was dangerous, but Ryan assured them he would be nearby, protecting her from a distance. Ms. Evans would also be involved, coordinating with trusted authorities to ensure everyone's safety. Chloe, when she heard the plan, was silent for a long time. Then, with a firm voice Luke hadn't heard in months, she said, "I'll do it. Not for me, but for the other women. For the ones he might have hurt, and the ones he could hurt if we don't stop him now." The meeting was set for a public place, an elegant cafe on Fifth Avenue during the lunch rush when there would be plenty of people around. Chloe was 7 months pregnant now, her belly prominent under a simple but beautiful navy blue dress. She had mentally rehearsed what she would say, how she would react, but her heart was racing as she saw Edward walk into the cafe. He was impeccable as always, dark grey suit, silk tie, perfectly styled hair. But there was something different in his eyes, an anxiety he tried to hide, but that Chloe, who had known him so intimately, could see. He was worried, and that gave her a small advantage. "Chloe," he said, sitting down at the table, "you look beautiful. Pregnancy has made you radiant." She didn't respond to the compliment. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me, Edward. We needed to talk." He reached for her hand across the table, but Chloe subtly pulled it away. The small recording device Ms. Evans had provided was hidden in her purse, capturing every word. Luke and Tyler were at nearby tables, disguised, watching closely. And somewhere nearby, as Ryan had promised, he was there too, ensuring her safety. "I've missed you," Edward said, his voice soft but with an underlying tension. "You and our son. When are you coming home?" Chloe took a deep breath. "Edward, I need you to be honest with me about everything, about the pregnancy, the clinics, what you did." His face tightened slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. I saw the documents, Edward. I know about the procedures, the manipulation, the other women. And I need to hear it from you. Why? Why would you do that to me?" He was silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the cafe as if assessing who might be listening. Then, perhaps judging that a partial confession might win her back, he leaned forward and spoke, his voice low. Because I wanted to guarantee perfection, Chloe. You don't understand. We live in a competitive world. Our son needed to have the best possible chances. Intelligence, health, looks. I just used the resources available to ensure that. Without consulting me, without my consent, you treated me like an object, Edward, like an incubator. He sighed, impatient. You're being dramatic. I did it for us, for our family. And as for the other women you mentioned, they're just clients. Men who, like me, want the best for their heirs. There's nothing wrong with that. Chloe felt sick. The coldness with which he spoke, the complete lack of remorse, was shocking, even for someone who had lived with him for 3 years. Are you telling me there's a whole scheme? That you and other men are manipulating pregnancies without the women's knowledge? Edward realized he had said too much. His expression hardened. What are you getting at, Chloe? She stood up, her hand protectively on her belly. I want you to know that I'm not going to let this go, that the women you use deserve to know the truth, and that our son, when he grows up, will know what kind of man his father was. Edward stood up too, and for the first time Chloe saw genuine rage in his eyes. You're not going to do any of that. You have no proof, no resources, no anything, and if you try to expose me, I will destroy you and your insignificant brothers. Do you understand? I understand perfectly, Chloe said, grabbing her purse. For the first time, I understand exactly who you are. She walked out of the cafe with her head held high, ignoring his calls. Luke and Tyler followed her discreetly. The recording was perfect. Edward had confessed enough that, combined with all the other evidence, they could build a solid case. In the days that followed, everything happened quickly. Ms. Evans, working with a trusted assistant district attorney, presented all the evidence. The clinic records that Ryan's informant had secured, showing dozens of unauthorized procedures, the financial documents revealing illicit payments, and the recording of Edward confessing his involvement. The police operation was launched on an August morning. Several clinics were raided, doctors were arrested, records were seized, and Edward Price, the respected attorney, was taken in for questioning. With his connections unable to protect him this time, as the case had gone federal, he finally began to face the consequences of his actions. Chloe watched it all on the news, safe in her brother's apartment. The headlines were shocking. The scandal was bigger than anyone had imagined. Women started coming forward, sharing their stories of strange medical procedures, unexplained pregnancies, and guarded secrets. It was as if Chloe, by having the courage to speak up, had opened the floodgates for others to do the same. It was in the midst of all this chaos that there was a knock on the apartment door one night. Luke, cautious, looked through the peephole and his heart nearly stopped. There stood a tall man, his hair already graying at the temples, with a scruffy beard and tired but familiar eyes. Eyes he saw in the mirror every day. The Miller family eyes. Luke opened the door, and the two brothers stared at each other for a long moment. Then, without a word, they embraced. Ryan was home. Tyler, hearing the noise, came running and stopped, dumbfounded. And Chloe, emerging from her room with difficulty due to her heavy belly, began to cry at the sight of the brother she thought was lost forever. Ryan came in, and for hours he told them everything. The military mission that never ended but transformed into a long-term intelligence operation. How he had been assigned to investigate networks of influence peddling and stumbled upon the clinic scheme. How, upon discovering his sister had married one of the main players, he decided it was time to act, even if it meant breaking protocol and revealing he was alive. I couldn't let him hurt you, Chloe, Ryan said, holding his sister's hand. Not you, not any other woman. This scheme had to end. Chloe hugged him, sobbing. We thought you were dead. We cried so much. I know, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm here now, and I'm staying. With Ryan back and Edward finally facing justice, Chloe felt she could perhaps start to rebuild her life. The baby was growing healthy inside her. Dr. Wallace continued to monitor her pregnancy with the same care and kindness as always, and slowly, very slowly, she began to allow herself to feel something for him beyond gratitude. Henry never pushed. He never rushed. He understood that Chloe had been through a deep trauma and needed time, but he was there, constant, gentle, offering a friendly shoulder and an encouraging smile. And when finally, at an appointment 2 months later, Chloe held his hand and said, "Thank you for everything," he understood it meant much more than just those words. Edward's trial was long and exhausting, but the evidence was irrefutable. He was found guilty on multiple charges and would face years behind bars. The clinics were permanently shut down. The other men involved were also held accountable. And the affected women began a process of healing, knowing they had finally been heard. Chloe went into labor on a sunny October morning. Luke, Tyler, and Ryan rushed her to Bellevue, where Dr. Wallace was already waiting. The labor was long but without complications, and when finally, after hours of effort, she heard the baby's first cry, Chloe knew that everything she had been through was worth it. "It's a boy," Henry announced, placing the newborn in her arms. Healthy, strong, perfect. Chloe looked at her son's scrunched-up face, his closed eyes, his tiny hands, and she felt a love so overwhelming she thought her heart would explode. This was her son, not Edward's, not a product of the cruel scheme that had nearly destroyed her, but hers. And he would be raised with love, with truth, with dignity. "What are you going to name him?" Luke asked, emotional at the sight of his nephew. "Gabriel," Chloe said without hesitation. "It means God is my strength, because he's my message that even from the hardest things, something beautiful can be born." In the months that followed, life found a new rhythm. Chloe, Luke, Tyler, and Ryan rented a larger apartment in Queens where they could all live together, helping to care for Gabriel. The child grew up healthy, surrounded by uncles who adored him, and Henry, who had started out as just her doctor, became so much more. He visited Chloe regularly, always with a professional excuse, but they both knew it was more than that. He played with Gabriel, talked for hours with Chloe about everything and nothing, and brought her flowers for no special reason. When finally, on a quiet evening while Gabriel slept and the brothers were out, Henry found the courage to tell her he had fallen in love with her. Chloe wasn't surprised, because she had fallen in love with him too, not in the intense, suffocating way that had characterized her relationship with Edward, but in a gentle, secure way, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "I don't know if I'm ready for another relationship," she said honestly. "I'm still healing." Henry smiled. "I can wait, for as long as you need. I'm not going anywhere." And he didn't. He stayed, patient and constant, as Chloe rebuilt her life piece by piece. And when months later she finally felt ready to open her heart completely again, it was to him. Gabriel grew up in a home full of love, surrounded by a strong mother who survived the impossible, devoted uncles who would do anything for him, and a stepfather who loved him as his own. He would never know the complicated circumstances of his birth. To him it would just be a story of resilience that his mother would one day tell him when he was older. Chloe, watching Gabriel play at the neighborhood park on a sunny Saturday, with Henry chasing after him and her brothers laughing beside her, felt a deep sense of peace. She had walked through darkness and found the light. She had been broken and had rebuilt herself stronger than before. And when Gabriel ran to her, threw himself into her arms and said, "Mommy, I love you," she hugged him tight and whispered back, "You were born from pain, my love, but you will live in love. Always in love." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Chloe, her brothers, and her journey of overcoming adversity has touched your heart. If you were moved, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part of the story resonated with you the most. Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul and show that even in the most difficult situations, there is always hope for a new beginning. Chloe's courage in facing her challenges, the unconditional love of her brothers, and the possibility of a new love based on respect and tenderness remind us that it's never too late to rewrite our own story. We'll see you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on the strength that exists within each of us.